welcome everyone. We are going to dive straight into listening to Sergei, and hopefully he'll give us not only an update on any aspect of the horrible situation in Ukraine that he would like to discuss, but also leave some time for any questions that we have before a fuller discussion of how we respond as faith leaders. So thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Well, I would like to start with the good news, despite the horrible situation in Ukraine. Today is my aunt's birthday. So she's successfully going through chemotherapy, staying joyful, and she is with her family from the Black Sea region, from Mykolaiv. So they are safely in my house in Western Ukraine, in the sister city of Modesto called MLinC. Yes, in every public park in Modesto, you can see the direction signs to our sister cities, and it is there. So you can check it out next time you are in any park enjoying cool weather. So the situation is volatile, to say the least. Well, of course, we know the good news that the north of Kiev, the capital, the Russians were pushed back successfully. That's why my part of the family who came from Kiev 75 days ago to seek shelter in my house, they left on Saturday. This past Saturday, they left. They went back. They think it's safe now to be there, so they're fine. So the rest of the country, as you know, is doing not so well. Especially, we're talking about especially the southeastern part, where they're trying to make a land corridor to the Crimea, to the Crimean Peninsula that they occupied 8 years ago in 2014. So they were not so successful to advance from the south, even though they were using the submarines with ballistic missiles and everything else. But our men and women are pushing them back. And of course, all Ukrainians are thankful, and they tell me this every day. My aunt told me today several times too. They're thankful to the United States, first of all, for leading the support since last November, not waiting till February 24th. So that's very positive exception of this help. And as my friends and my family says, if not for this country, then they don't think Ukraine would be in existence at this point now. So thank you all. So maybe if you ask me questions, it will be easier, because I can swing to a philosophical perspective of this whole war, or just ask me. Maybe you ask me any questions, it will be easier for me, instead of just speaking about something I think to be important.
I have two questions, but let me ask one, and maybe others have questions as well. What would you say is the most important effort that we can make as individuals financially? In other words, we put together this list of many organizations doing humanitarian work, refugee work, even funding the Ukrainian army. Obviously, there's things that we can do to put pressure on our own government, but I'm saying as individuals, what would you recommend is the best recipient of whatever financial support we could provide?
I think the refugee children and their mothers, because they're usually with mothers, because fathers in the front lines. I think that's the best, because of course everybody needs support and help, but now the United States and Great Britain and finally European countries have been shipping equipment, military equipment and other things, protective gear and other things to the army, so they are better off now in this sense than the civilians who fled with their children.
And do you have any sense of, are there Ukrainian organizations on the ground that you would say are the best positioned to provide that aid, or just general refugee support groups?
No, I would go for more specific places, because I know that until a month ago, a lot of stuff was sent to Poland, and they were delivering over the border, which is good, of course. But there are some reliable organizations there that can find, well, most of the things that people need, and they can, having money, they would be able at least to fill up the cars to deliver things from western border or wherever help arrives. Yes.
Thank you. I'll hold my other question because I want others to ask theirs. I'm not sure why we're such a small group today, but I'm really appreciating that you're being with us and sharing this
It's
important.
all right, you know.
Yeah.
We are strong in spirit.
We're strong in
Not
spirit.
in numbers.
We're usually about 12 or more people, and right
Yeah,
now
that's
we're
all
about
right.
that.
Maybe because today, maybe people saw that today was 97 degree in the forecast.
I'm sure it wasn't about you or the topic. That's for sure.
Well, we can always find some good excuses. That's okay.
There you go. Who else has a question? And I'll mute for a second. I'm sure people have questions.
I don't quite have a question. I learned about something this morning. Shalom, I sent it to you as an email, but I just wanted to, perhaps Sergei might have a comment about it. I found out about an organization that is doing mindfulness-based trauma recovery for refugees. And I think they are actually doing some work with Ukrainians. I can do a quick screen share and just show you the site. And their mission is to help refugees heal. And I'm wondering if that might also be supportive for the mothers and children. I know that, you know, the trauma that they've experienced is probably horrific and will be a lifelong.
Of course. This is ongoing effort now too, and it's important for those. Well, first of all, it's important to be a native speaker, right? So they find native speakers, of course, and they help them to get through this.
They have a section on this website for supporting them. So it's something that you might want to check out and maybe spread the word, perhaps.
Yeah, that's another very important component of this whole support and help package. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Richard here. I'm just the videographer, but I want you to explain, if you can, why certain things are being claimed to be war crimes in Ukraine, when all I have to do is look at the devastation that the shelling and destruction of all of those houses that used to have people in there, that's a war crime in my book. Can you help me understand these nuances?
To understand what? I'm sorry, maybe I missed something.
Well, how is it that they're doing some charging people for war crimes, like this man who is accused?
Oh, you mean they're charging people, Ukrainians, of war crimes?
In Ukraine, they're judging a Russian troop, captain or something that was captured, and
yes,
a war crime. I don't get the distinction here. The whole thing is such a wreck of a people.
Yeah, I understand the question. Yeah. Well, because those were qualified as war crimes, and it's been done in court. And of course, people have a chance to defend themselves if they want to prove that it was not a war crime, whether he acted on orders of his superiors, or he maybe initiated these atrocities by himself with his bodies, maybe whether they were drunk or not. But these are qualified as war crimes. You know, there are quite a few criminalists now, criminal specialists that study war crimes and are on the ground in Ukraine right now, especially in those places surrounding the capital, Kyiv, where they're gathering evidence because they want to bring those people to, and their commanders, and those who sit in Moscow, in Kremlin as well, those who issued commands, to the International Criminal Court, ICC.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Let me ask the second one that I had, and maybe it'll prompt someone to realize they do have a question. I know that you're, I imagine, getting a lot of information from friends and relatives that are there. are you finding that there's a particular good source for staying up on this information other than friends and relatives? And I ask because with our news cycle, this was, headlines a few weeks ago, a few months ago, and now we have to really kind of dig through to see what's going on. And I'm just wondering how you have found yourself feeling most informed and what you'd recommend to those who are trying
Well,
to.
I read and watch Ukrainian sources, right? But my wife stays pretty much on top of those things, even though she doesn't speak or read Ukrainian. She watches BBC News Ukraine in English. She reads the newspaper, and I put it in the chat, Kyiv Post, which comes out in English. And so there are quite a few sources there in English. Not so many, of course, as you can find Russian sources in English, because they've been working on that for years and pouring in billions of dollars, to brainwash, Western audience for years. But there are some. These are reliable. I will put now Kyiv Post, BBC Ukraine. And these will to start with, and then many others will be popping up there. Okay.
Thank you. I was not familiar with Kyiv Post, and that sounds like a wonderful.
It's very good one. It's been there for years. Then it was sold before the war, and then people restored it themselves. Like crowdfunding, and just it's very good. It's very objective. It's widely read, and it's highly professional.
Okay, well, my third question is, and if it's personal and don't feel able to answer it, that's fine. But I'm curious, do you find yourself hopeful? Do you find yourself optimistic we're nearing the end of this? What is your, being familiar with the situation as you are, what does your gut tell you is what the next couple of weeks might look like? Well,
yes, I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, and at the same time, I'm realistic. It will not end so quickly as we all want it to end, obviously. But I think from what I read, and I read a lot of analytics, both from here, from Great Britain intelligence, Ukrainian analytics, and now Ukrainians are getting so much more weaponry, heavy weaponry, that because they were surviving basically on Stingers and Javelins, which are defense light weapons, right? Now they're getting something real from United States and Great Britain, and finally some from Germany, but very little. And so now this is going to be a breaking moment, I believe, in about a month. Now it's more of a tug of war, even though the Russian superiority is huge. Currently on the Ukrainian soil, there are 167,000 Russian troops. Yeah. So in many places, the volunteers are holding them back. And again, they're still there, and they're advancing in some places because they're shooting from long-range ballistic missiles, and they're damaging infrastructure, including the oil refineries, other things, and so they cannot be reached yet. But so I anticipate. Yeah, I'm hopeful. I anticipate, and Ukrainians are hopeful too. They don't want to allow anybody in their government to somehow sign a peace treaty at this moment with an excuse of stopping the bloodshed. They don't want that, because they know that the signed peace treaty with Russia will not be worth the paper it is signed on. It cannot be trusted. We all know this. We have a long history of seeing how, even the Budapest Agreement, when Ukrainians gave up the third nuclear arsenal in the world, right? And so the guarantees were given, and one of the guarantors was Russian Federation. So people don't want. They obviously want to end the war, but they do not want to end the war because they are threatened, and they don't want to start the peace treaty, knowing that it can be repeated in a year, 2 years, 3, 5 years, doesn't matter when.
I'd love to see if there's an additional question for Sergei. For those that don't realize, we have a wonderful resource of information. Yes, go ahead, Wayne.
Sergei, would I interpret what you just said in terms of hope? Do I interpret that correctly to mean that for there to be lasting peace, the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian people are going to have to push Russia totally out of Ukraine, period?
Yes, they will have to win and restore the occupied territories, yes. And they have full support, I see, if you listen to Anthony Blinken, right, whose family is from Ukraine, his ancestors from Ukraine, you know, Shalom, right, whom I'm talking about? Anthony Blinken, yes. So when you listen to him and you listen to other people from Great Britain, I'm talking about major supporters, they all are talking now about victory, not about just giving up or ceasefire or something like that, because that cannot be reliable, it can be trusted, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and the only major leader who tried to persuade President Zelensky to accept concessions and to sign the peace treaty in exchange for some occupied territories, newly occupied territories, was re-elected President Macron. He spoke about it to Zelensky, obviously over the phone, but then Zelensky the next day, just as we would say, leaked it to the press. He said, you know, we want to be transparent. We can't just, you can't just try to talk me into you know, concessions for peace. And that was a very important thing to know for the rest of the world, who is who.
And I think Richard looks like has our last comment or question.
Question, yes. I have such a hope that maybe NATO will allow the Ukrainians to join. I mean, we're getting Sweden and Finland in there. Do you think, I don't know anything about the politics here, do you think it's realistic that that admission could come soon enough to help?
As they joke in Ukraine now, the admission of NATO to Ukraine is now open. I don't know if I correctly translated it, but so the application now for the NATO countries is available to join Ukraine.
Oh,
so yes, yes. Well, because you understand that what Ukrainians and Ukrainian army showed without having nearly close technical abilities that NATO says they have, and they do have, then after what they showed, after they stopped and after they've been a barrier and a buffer, you know, between Russia and Western Europe for so long, and what they demonstrated now, it should not be even a question, because before that, and now, you know, Ukraine filled out the application for European Union too. And of course, the countries who say that Ukraine does not qualify yet, as if Bulgaria or Romania qualified when they were accepted, you understand? So now those who say, those are Hungary, number one, and then of course France is there too. They're saying, oh, you need to fulfill this and this and this and that, you know. So we're talking about the political will that is needed, not numerous barriers that exist on paper. Yes. So yes, I from what I read and I see that NATO wants Ukraine, European Union wants Ukraine in there, because they'll be only will get stronger.
Yeah.
You know, give them 40 million people and the land of the biggest country entirely in Europe is Ukraine by territory. So, and resources, and 38% of black soil, you know, and all these things, and obviously courageous and hardworking people.
Yes.
So we can push them. We can, you know, we can write our organizations, we as individuals, we can write to our representatives, we can vote for those who from whom we demand to help with that, because obviously NATO is hanging in there all these years thanks to the United States, not thanks to Germany, who spent less than 1% of their GDP, or France or something. So our representatives have very strong clout and very strong influence on decision making when it comes to such matters, and I hope they will push them even stronger. Them meaning Western Europe.
Sergei, thank you so much for being with us. What I'm reminded of, and I think it's Elie Wiesel who said this, but it may have been someone else. He said, "A witness to a witness is a witness." And I often think of that statement in the context of survivors of the Holocaust, who are very few of them are left. But if you've heard a witness, then you become a witness. And I think that that's now true of us. This may have left some of the headlines, but I know it does not leave our hearts. And I would hope that everyone who's here, again, we're a small group, but imagine how many people we can each be in touch with to not only share what I think is a message of hope and optimism, but of action, that there are things that we can do here as Modestans, as Americans. There's ways that we can activate our own government, and there's certainly ways that we can support directly. And being informed is obviously the first part of all that. So
number one thing. Yes.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but I also want to be cognizant you probably have other things to do today.
Yes, yeah. And I just wanted to add to you that the Jewish community in Ukraine, with a center in Kyiv and other places, of course, they're doing a great deal of wonderful things. And they, even when they were offered, the escape or anything else, no, they stay there, and they work very closely with the. And this is, of course, non-governmental organization, right? They work very closely with the Ukrainian government, and they work very closely with the NGOs and even government organizations in Israel as well. So there is a huge support.
Well, Zelensky,
Well, I thank you all for your
hero.
support. Yes,
I'm honored to be in the same tribe as someone such as him, who not only obviously did not abandon his people, but is standing strong with them and truly leading. I can think of no greater leader, literally in the whole world, than him. The fact that he's Jewish may be a source of pride for me, but more importantly, he's a source of inspiration for billions of people around the world.
and he defied, and he he's a living defiance to all those bogus statements from Putin and his buddies, who are, denazification of Ukraine. They're getting rid of Ukraine from the Nazis.
Well, unfortunately, it is a well-played playbook that accuse your enemies of doing what you're doing, and you can get away with practically anything. We're hoping that he's not getting away with this.
And oh no. And of course, yesterday wonderful news came that McDonald's is not just stopping the war, they're completely getting out of Russia. So,
well, on that happy note,
yes, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you
I'll
so
join
much.
you again anytime you want me to, and peace be with you.
Okay,
Shalom
stay
Aleichem.
in touch. Be well.